Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to Cinema Café. My name is John Nine. I'm one of the senior programmers here at the festival. Welcome to not only our series, but our awesome new set, which we're very happy about. We have a great group of panels and Cinema Café conversations throughout the festival. I urge you to take a look at the program. It's one of the best ways of engaging with the films outside of actually seeing them themselves. It's one of the reasons I think being up at a festival is different than just seeing a film. So we're really happy that you're here, and we're also really happy to have this group this morning as part of our New York Times talks. Toni Collette, who is in the film Glassland in our World Cinema Dramatic Competition, and Saoirse Ronan, who is in both two films, Brooklyn, which is in our premiere section, and Stockholm, Pennsylvania, which is one of the US dramatic competition films. And to tell you a little bit more about talks, I'm going to introduce my good colleague, the Director of Programming for Times Talks, Carol Day.
Thank you, John. We are so honored and delighted to be a part of Sundance again this year and to bring Times Talks here to Park City. We're live here in Park City and live around the world on timestalks.com. The New York Times covers movies like we cover the world, and we are so interested in everything that Sundance does. We salute them for bringing films from around the world here so that we can all experience their creativity, the craft, and their stories. And we're delighted to have these guests today. It's going to be a really exciting conversation led by our moderator, who is the New York Times carpetbagger. She and her colleagues on nytimes.com and in the paper cover the red carpet, the movies, all the new films here at Sundance, the people who make them, moves by the moguls, technological breakthroughs, and more. So I'd like to introduce Cara Buckley from the New York Times and our special guests, Saoirse Ronan and Toni Collette.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thanks, ladies, for coming. These ladies have, obviously, between them, 3 films here at Sundance, and I want to especially thank Toni for pinch-hitting, sort of at the last minute, one of your co-star. Jack, he was going to be here, but for scheduling reasons, couldn't make it, so Toni is going to pretend she's stepping up. So.
Nobody wants to.
Are they working? So I thought we would start off with if both of you could just describe your movies that you're hearing, your characters in Brooklyn and Stockholm, Pennsylvania, and then in Glassland. So, Saoirse, if you'd like to start us off.
Sure. Hello, everyone, by the way. It's nice to see you all. I feel like I'm in somebody's living room. My first film is called Stockholm, Pennsylvania, and it's about a young girl who was kidnapped when she was about 4.5 years old, and she's kept in a basement for light stuff for about 17 years. And she never leaves the basement. That becomes her world. And our movie starts when she's in her early 20s and she's been discovered and she's been returned back to her biological parents. And it's basically it's very much about the relationship between her and her mother, and how her mother kind of becomes so obsessive and paranoid and kind of manic about creating this lost relationship with her daughter that she's never really had since she was a child and will never really get back. So that's the first one, that was written and directed by Nicole Beckwith. And the second one is Brooklyn, and it's completely different, which is great. It's set in the 1950s, based on a Colm Tóibín novel, beautiful novel, and it was adapted by Nick Hornby. And it's about a girl called Eilish, who, is in her early 20s again and goes over to New York to start a new life. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
Evening. I am here with a film called Glassland, which was written and directed by Gerard Barrett. It's an Irish film, so you can judge my accent. It's kind of a love story. It's about this boy, played by Jack Reynor, and everything he tries to do for his mother, who is systematically killing herself through alcoholism. It's beautiful, it's stark and it's raw and it's emotional and kind of frightening, but poetic.
Now, in both of your careers, you played a Polish girl. You've played Americans too. I was wondering, your accents are both so good in both films. Were you able to do that through dialect coach, or do you just get an ear for it over the years?
I usually really do not like working with dialect coaches because it makes me so self-conscious about what I'm doing rather than just being in the moment and trying to create something truthful. However, this film, Glassland, is kind of set in an area of Dublin, and I've spent a lot of time in Ireland, but I had not been to this area called Tala, and it's a very specific dialect which I'd never heard before, and so I may as well have been learning Chinese. It was just so foreign to me. So I was panicked, and I wondered whether perhaps they should have recast right before we started shooting. That's how nervous I was. But I worked with a wonderful actor/dialect coach in Dublin who got me across the line. I think also when things are theoretical and you're just kind of ruminating, it can blow up into a monster, but once you start shooting, it all becomes practical. It's much easier, yeah.
I actually love working with dialect coaches. I was very lucky that the very first film that I did, I worked with an incredible dialect coach called Jill McCullough, who really kind of set the foundation for me when it came to the American accent, which I've done kind of more than any other accent. And she really opened up my ear to different sounds and how to use your mouth to make these sounds work and sound natural and all that sort of stuff. So I was very lucky that I started out with someone like her, and I've actually always found it's been a really huge part of me. I mean, I'm not method. I don't break down the script or anything like that beforehand or really deal with structure or anything. But the only thing that I do really focus on in a kind of technicality sense is the accent. Because I guess, being Irish as well, we've got a strong, distinctive sound to the way we speak. And it really does, in a great way, it kind of defines who we are and how we communicate and our relationships with the rest of the world, I think, which, hopefully you can see a little bit in Brooklyn, if any of you want to go and see it. But yeah, so I've always really loved doing that. The accent has always to really bring the character to life for me, so.
And have you felt, as you're doing these different accents, that it affects the character itself? Like, does the character feel different if it's an Australian character or an American character, just by virtue of being different nationalities?
Everything affects everything. I mean, yeah, sure. Does affect where this character is culturally, although I think I tend to work on stories that have a universality about them. Anything can kind of be an entry point for me. It could be a piece of wardrobe, or it could be anything. I think everything's connected. So absolutely, the voice is a massive part of it.
Yeah, I agree with Toni. I think the accent is as much a part of who the as the physicality is, or the situation that they're in, the world that they're in, and how that's kind of affected who that person is, But I mean, a lot of instances when I do certain projects, like there was one I did a few years ago, and when I read her on the page, she was just this kind of bitchy little teenager who, didn't want to talk to grown-ups and cursed a lot, and she was from New York, and I was born in New York. I love New York so much, and I love New Yorkers, and I love the NY Times. But
what a suck.
Right? Just slip it in there. Just gonna slip it in there. Thanks, guys. But I do feel like, with an accent like a New York accent, that completely changed how I played that character. It changed her attitude. It really influenced the confidence that she had, how she held herself. So so that in certain cases that would make a huge difference for me.
And I spoke to you a little bit about this beforehand. Both of you have had career paths, you at the ripe old age of 20, that the characters haven't been, these like rom-com, girl meets boy. Characters where vanity is left aside, or they're strong in a different way, or it's not about getting the guy. Was this a conscious decision? You know what I mean?
Fuck yeah. That would be so boring and limiting. Who wants to be a handbag? People are rich. Women are rich. There are so many different types of humans and so many different stories to tell. I think it would be to only make those kinds of movies. There's certainly room for, and I enjoy them too, but I don't want to spend my working time on them.
Yeah, I've actually only been talking about this recently because, I think when I started out, I was a kid. An awful lot of it was to do with luck, the fact that I was in the films that I was, and they were very much character-based, and they were never even just your typical or a girly girl. And to be honest, those kind of characters have never interested me. I don't really particularly like watching them on screen. And as Toni says, and I'm starting to realise more and more as I'm coming into my early 20s, that a woman has got so many layers to her, and there's such a strength in women, I think. To not explore that is such a shame. It really is. And so, yeah, I've been very conscious about that as well. Just playing people who, could basically be a man or a woman in a film. And that's why I love what Toni does, what Kate Blanchett does, what Meryl does, because always it's never been about their sexuality, the way they look, how sexy they are, what they're wearing. It's always been about what's going on in their head, and that's what we need to see in cinema.
Hear, hear. There is this idea that there aren't enough roles like that, though. Yet both of you continue. Is that just how did you make that happen? How did that happen?
Patience.
I think it's probably just who we are. We don't gravitate towards that kind of material, and luckily enough, we've had some great parts offered to us. I just don't think it's who I am. I mean, we were talking backstage, wondering whether it's a cultural thing. We're not American, and those kinds of films do tend to be made here. But I don't even know whether that might be the answer. I think it's just simply who I am.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just who you are as a person. And, when you're meeting people and you're meeting about projects and things like that, you either click with these people or you don't, just like you would with a book or a movie. Or
it's about connection.
You
it's
need
how
to
you
connect with it. So that's not something that we've ever really been interested in, I guess. So our agents are smart enough to know not to send us that kind of stuff. But I don't know about you, but certainly at the age that I'm at now, I'm kind of somewhere in between being a woman and not being able to do the whole coming of age thing anymore. And I don't want to do that stuff anymore, really.
But we're always coming of age. That's the thing. People are constantly growing, so that will never end.
But like that typical sort of, is she going to get her first kiss now? And, the boys walking down the corridor. Yeah. Is she going to lose her virginity tonight? Or, so I've seen that and I've gone through that and all that stuff, and I'm kind of ready to. But, there is a certain amount of patience that comes with that, I think, to really wait for the right thing instead of just churning out work. If you want to do that, that's fine, but churning out work whenever it comes to you. I've always wanted to wait for the right project to come along, and sometimes that could be a bloody year, you never know. We could never work again. We may never work again if we don't. That's the kind of part of the life of filmmakers and actors, it's uncertain and it's unpredictable, and that's why it's so wonderful when it works out.
Well, why don't we see a clip? I'd love to show you a clip from Glassland, Toni's film. If we could cue that up, that would be great.
The weird part is, now people began to pity me. My mum and dad, friends, my sister. No one would return my calls. No one wanted to help. And I got a new friend. A silent friend. A friend that would never talk back to me or hurt me. A friend that was always there for me. And made things better. Even if it was just for a little while. I would go missing for days and no one would come looking for me. Only you, John. You always came looking for me. Even when you were a baby. Still do.
So for me, that was one of the roles where there was no thought of, you're unafraid, it seems, to show these really dark...
Oh, I was afraid.
You seemed unafraid. To show, people in the pits of things. And is there ever, just an idea of that feels too vulnerable, that feels too dark?
Well, that's why it's scary, because it is vulnerable. You walk onto a set, you don't know anyone, and you have to be bare, and it can be, intimidating. This was a huge challenge in the best possible way. This woman is so selfish and can't see beyond her own addiction. She's very stuck. Her life basically fell apart, and she hasn't moved beyond that. And her son's trying to help her, and she doesn't want reality. It was very raw. And what I love about it is that Jared, in the first conversation we had, just said, I just want it to be honest. And I love watching movies where you get lost in it and you can't see people joining the dots, and it just feels like nothing between the audience and what's going on in the story. And I think he really achieved that in this movie.
And the relationship with you and your son is so intimate. Did you have to prepare beforehand, spend any time together to sort of forge that sense of intimacy?
We had very little time. The whole shoot was, I think, about 17 days long. I was only on it for 4.5 days. It was the most intense time. There's no easy scene. Usually there are a couple of, small scenes to shoot. Everything was very confronting and intense and emotional. And Jack and Jared flew over to New York, where I was working at the end of, what year is it? The end of 2013. And we had one afternoon in a little church hall in Brooklyn somewhere where we talked through the script, talked about the characters, talked about their relationship. And then there we were in Dublin. Jack took me to the Guinness Brewery. We had a little tour. I got certified as being able to pull my own pint. And we sat at the bar that overlooks all of Dublin and talked for a couple of hours. And we had a couple of little meetings like that, but it was very much straight into it. And I think we were so in love with the script, and it felt so important somehow. And I have to say, Jack is one of the best actors I've ever worked with. He was so open that it was very easy. There wasn't much work that had to be done to arrive at those kind of heightened emotional starting points in every scene. It just felt very palpable and in an effortless way. And I really thank him for that. He's so brilliant in the movie. Yeah.
And did you have to, how did you portray alcoholism in such a raw way, but it's so authentic? How did you know to do that, to act that way, to be, that sort of, like you said, you couldn't see beyond yourself, and yet you were so caught up in the addiction to alcohol. How did you know how to play her that way?
Well, I think more than anything, it's about the love between mother and son, and so it all relates back to that. I think she just lives in a world of guilt because she can't get herself out of it, and then just drinks herself further into it. I think I had the luxury of working with a really brilliant script, to be honest, and it's not like I went and hung out with a bunch of alcoholics. It was just my imagining of how it would be. I mean, she's animalistic. It becomes very desperate.
And after playing a role like that, do you have to sort of take some time to decompress from just almost the toxicity of it?
When I went straight from set to the airport in Dublin to fly to London, where I was stopping for a couple of days before flying back to New York. And I got on the plane, I was thinking, I don't feel very well. uncomfortable, and the plane took off, and then all of a sudden I was just racing to the bathroom. I didn't even quite make it into the bowl, and I just vomited. And I don't think it was something I ate. I think it was like an emotional purge. It was so strange and profound and hideous.
It wasn't from all those pints you had before, was it?
Not at all. I don't drink much beer. I don't like it.
And actually, just as a seg, why don't we bring up one of Saoirse's films? If we could do the scene from Brooklyn, which is a lovely scene. It's you and Donald dancing. Yeah.
I can't wait to see this movie. Come on.
It's a lovely movie. If we could line up that clip, that would be great. I noticed you weren't watching it. Do you not like to watch yourself?
No, I really don't.
Just is listening hard as well?
No, to listen is okay. I mean, I was listening to it. I'll probably cry during this once I talk about Brooklyn. I've never had a film that's affected me like this before, and I still to this day I think about the script, and I think about the words that Colm and Nick wrote, and how just really beautifully and heartbreakingly it captures going away and leaving home,
right.
and experiencing love for the first time, and then all the complications that come with that, you know. So so it really affects me, but I hate watching myself, so I'm not able for that at all. Donald sounded great though.
The book and the film felt like a parable of, the Irish experience. Once you move away, nothing is exactly home again. And although you were 3 when you were born in the Bronx, and 3, right, when you left, do you have that sense too with America, just sort of that slight longing, like where do I belong in a way?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I always have done. I know when I started primary school, when I was back at home in Ireland, and I was in a town, I grew up in a town that's 20 minutes away from where this book is set, and where we actually shot all of those scenes, which was another thing that was like a lot to take, because there were kids there that, I went to basketball practice with when I was younger, and all of a sudden they were in the dance hall, and they that I was in, and it was like incredible how home and my work life, I suppose you call it, how they've just crossed over so kind of dramatically with something like this, you know. But yeah, you're right. I think that's the kind of beautiful thing about the film is that, and it was John that really made things clear to me as we went on. I learned so many different things about the script that I didn't even realise were there to begin with. So many different facets and layers and just, you know, colours that I hadn't even read into, which shows how fantastic he is at really reading stories and reading characters. But one of the things that I really started to realise and I've gone through it myself, is that once you leave home, it's never quite the same again. And once you leave your parents' home, you know, it's kind of essentially the end of your childhood and the end of that very pure, magical, hopefully magical time in your life, you know. And there's a mourning, I think, that comes with that, you know, that even I'm still going through now, and Ailish goes through in this. So it really hit me when I did this film.
I'm going back to the accent. I'm sorry, I'm a little accent fixated. So you didn't have to change anything, right, in the way you intoned. Was it in Wexford where it was set? So you obviously, being Irish, can tell, you know, the different dialects. So did you have to switch it up a bit for this?
Yeah, I did, and I was actually really nervous about it because it was, you know, I was Irish in Grand Budapest, but she's like from a whole other place. But, you know, I would really have sort of a Dublin accent, what you'd call kind of generic Dublin accent, because of my parents. And I grew up in the country, but never really had a country accent. So I was quite nervous. I felt like there was a real responsibility to get it right, and I felt like all eyes and all ears were going to be on me for the whole thing. Like, she better get this right now. She better not feck it up.
Try being Australian in Ireland doing
yeah,
that.
exactly. No, but you know, when you're Irish already and then you mess up another Irish accent, like the ultimate failure. So we all worked on it. We worked on it with a great Irish dialect coach. I don't know if you had Brendan Gunn at all that came in. Really cool dialect coach. Yeah, and we worked on the accent, and you know, mine's kind of like this, but Ailish's accent is a little bit softer, and everything's kind of a little bit more sing-songy, and you know, so it was just little nuances like that we added into the way they sounded.
And is the Wexford, how would you describe the differences with the Wexford? I lived in Ireland until I was 8, actually, so I'm a little obsessed with this. How was the accent different in Wexford? Like, what was different in the wording and stuff?
Well, just that there, I mean, that was me doing my example of a Wexford accent. No, it's actually usually, nobody picked up on that. Never mind. I guess I just sounded like a dub in that then. No, the Wexford accent usually is a lot harsher, but we didn't want to make it too harsh for the film because we wanted, you know, an international audience to be able to understand us. So, so it was just that really. I mean, I've got quite sharp sounds in the way I speak, and everything's very kind of flat, and everything's sort of like at the front of your mouth, you know, whereas with the Wexford accent, it's kind of brought back a little bit. So it's just a little bit of a change there.
And had you read the book before?
I actually did. Usually I don't, but I had read the book ages ago before the script even came up, and again was really kind of struck by how this was very much my mum and dad's story, and what they went through when they moved over to New York, and how, you know, at one stage they were walking down the street in the Bronx and literally had 20 cents to their name, and, you know, worked incredibly hard for, you know, 15 years, and it's an amazing thing, I think, to be able for us to go back now, especially for my mum, to be able to go back to the States with her daughter, who's a US citizen and who's working over there.
She's here now, right? Your mom?
She's crying in the front. But she did all that. So, you know, I think it was a huge responsibility with this film because it's generations and generations and generations of our people, of Polish people who came over after the war, of Africans, of English, Scottish, all these different cultures that, you know, kind of became a real community in this incredible city that to this day is still such a huge melting pot, you know. And not to romanticize it, you know, it's tough. It's so tough on the people who have gone over there to this day. If you don't have money there, it's really hard to live in New York, especially, you know, around that time. I mean, John told me a story once about a man who moved over there. I can't remember when it was. Maybe it would have been much, much earlier. Maybe during the famine time, I don't know. It was earlier than the 50s anyway. And this man moved over from, I think it was Ireland, and he left his 4 kids behind and his wife. And he worked in New York for 4 years to raise enough money to bring his family over. He didn't see his family for 4 years. He didn't see his kids grow up, you know. And he knew that they were coming over, say, around a certain date on the boat, but wasn't quite sure when. So he didn't come to the immigration office when they turned up. And they were there on their own in this place that they knew nothing about. I mean, they had no media back then. It's not like nowadays where we know everything about America, and it's such a huge part of our pop culture, you know, and our media and everything. They didn't have that. And I just think about children that were sent over there who didn't know anything about this place and were just thrown into a world that, you know, was big and scary, and their duty was to get a job and make money, you know, for their family. So it's incredible what they've all done. It really is.
So that must have felt like a huge sense of responsibility as well. Yeah. Because you're sort of encapsulating, I mean, centuries and, you know, the things that drove, Irish away. Yeah. Eilish is also a very internal character in a way, which is sort of, well, Stockholm, Pennsylvania is a very internal character because she doesn't know how to interact with the world.
She's been in a basement for 17 years.
She's been in a basement for 17 years. Could we see, actually, as the Stockholm, Pennsylvania clip, if we could line that up? I know it's a bit of a different subject, but here we are. She's with her mom.
You used to love beads. Your Aunt Jill had a bead shop before she moved to Santa Fe. And you love to go in there and sink your hands deep into the bins of glass beads. I wanted to get you some, but I was always afraid you'd eat them when I wasn't looking. What are you making?
A string of beads.
So I have room for about 6 more, but I have 10 beads left. Which ones do you think I should leave out?
Any of them.
Well, help me out. Which ones do you think? Oh, I know. Okay.
Also, ones isn't a word. I did say some stuff there.
She did.
I swear I speak in films sometimes. I said to her, I know things. I wasn't nothing to him.
Yeah.
He taught me things, basically.
I mean, you're so frozen, right? Was that the part just seemed like you like you said in the film, you don't know how to be in the world. So did you feel like throughout the filming and stuff, like she was just lost, frozen? Like, how do you navigate that character?
I mean, I was worried for a minute, to be honest, when I read the script that it was going to be too similar to Hannah, to what I did in Hannah, because she is also in the sort of situation where she's in a world that's very foreign to her, and she's very much an alien, and really doesn't understand what's going on. I think with Leia, though, she's been raised with a lot of love, and she's smart. She's a smart girl, and she knows a lot about the world. There's some stuff that was cut out, but she'll come out with just different, like very specific things that Ben taught her about, you know, why children don't like Brussels sprouts and you know, like random things like that. But she was educated, and I think that the frustrating thing about her character for the other characters around her is that she very much stays as she is through the entire thing. There's no real arc for this character at all. And I had never played anyone like that before, where there's no kind of transformation or eureka moment or kind of like, okay, she's seen the light now, or, you know, whatever. She stays as Leia, as she always has been, and is very much Ben's, until there's a moment near the end where she realizes that I guess she needs to make her own way in the world. But and how she manages things is very specific to what he taught her. And there are certain instances in the film where she has to remind this woman who insults her intelligence because she's so desperate for her love and wants to kind of mother her like she would a 4-year-old. She has to remind her, you know, I'm not stupid. I was taught things. I'm not a child anymore. And that's where the frustration comes in for her, and that's why the relationship just never really works.
And the thing is, too, and it's, as an audience member, you don't get that sense of catharsis with your character, with Leia, because she loved Ben. Ben, who kept her in the basement, obviously for 17 years he kept her in the basement, but she loves him, she trusts him, and now
he loves her.
Yeah,
he sincerely loves her, and they have. Plus, Ben has never really been a villain. He was somebody who did the wrong thing, and was quite narcissistic in the way he went about things by keeping this child to adore him and learn from only him and have him be her sort of god, basically. But he was everything to her. He represented everything to her: her father, her best friend, her brother, her lover, you know. And it's a very complicated relationship, but it is a relationship that they both were willing to be in. They both really loved each other.
And how did that script come to you? Did you have any other qualms going in?
No, I didn't. Apart from that one comparison to Henna, I don't know why I did that in an Australian accent.
Was that Australian?
Because you're here. Whoa, that was Australian.
Henna.
But Henna. Yeah, I loved it. I loved the script. I loved how different it was. Again, like what Toni and I were talking about earlier, always when something's different and new and done, you know, in an unusual way, it's appealing and it's really exciting and it's scary, and I liked going into something that was new for me. So.
Changing track a little bit, both of you travel so much and you live relatively far away. I mean, your home is in Ireland, yours in Australia. I'm wondering, when you're on the road, I think you bring Barry's tea with you. Like, how do you, when you're Barry's is the best tea?
The best tea.
It's an Irish tea.
I go for Thai fu, actually.
Like, how you, in all of that, sort of, you know, maintain a sense of home, you know, traveling so much. And
I've been living out of a suitcase for 20 years, and now I have children. So we're a travelling circus. It is fun, actually, and we just got very good at setting up home wherever we are for, you know, succinct periods of time. But I always said that my kids would kind of determine when it's time to settle down, and that time has come, so it's happening.
Back to Australia for a bit.
I didn't say Australia.
Okay. Somewhere.
Yeah, home is a big part of who I am, but at the same time, and home for me is Ireland, but it's also, in a way, America, even though I grew up in Ireland. But, you know, since I was 10, I've been traveling a lot. And I've lived out of a suitcase in different places and worked with different kinds of people and been exposed to and it's amazing. It's a really great kind of education for somebody who's young or at any age, you know. The tea always helps. I love my Irish tea. Talking to my mum 3 times a day always reminds me of home and keeps me sane.
Thank God for FaceTime and Skype now.
I know,
that didn't
yeah.
exist when I was your age. I remember calling my parents from London, like, can you please come over here?
Well, that's what Brooklyn made me think of as well. You know, you talk to your mother once a year or, you know, write a letter every month. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of, it's unimaginable. It really is. We're all so excited now, for better or for worse. So, but yeah, it's, you know, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to be away from home, but I'm very used to it. So, I always try and make my Sunday dinner whenever I'm away, because Mum, whenever she came away with me, she'd always make Sunday dinner. So we'd always have a roast chicken with all of our roast vegetables and our spuds and everything. So I still try and do that now as well.
And another question, and we're going to be, after this question, we'll be opening it up for questions from you, from the audience. So start thinking.
Quick.
I'm wondering if moving to America, if that isn't already your home, if that would ever be a consideration as, you know, being actresses from Ireland and Australia, or would you rather sort of stay away from the LA bubble, you know, just for yourself and your family and your perspective on things?
I think my perspective is pretty well set, and I have kind of been determined not to live in America for many years. Because I just have a different sensibility. I've spent a lot of time in London and in Ireland, and I feel more comfortable in those places, to be frank. However, Los Angeles is much closer to Sydney than London, and I think, you know, I finally have succumbed to it. Geographically, it works, and it's a very. I've been working there for you know, chunks of months on end for years and years. I have wonderful friends there, and it's a very easy way of life. So yeah, that's where I'll be residing for a while.
I would absolutely move to America. I think America is a very complicated country. I think it's fascinating. I think how it started and why that it started, I guess, why this land was founded is quite fascinating. The dreams that they were built on, and also the lives that were crushed, and you know what I mean. There's a real kind of to this country, and it's so diverse. And you know, I've never been to Utah before, and I was in LA before this, and to just see how different all these different states are is really fascinating, and I love it. Yeah, I would absolutely move. I actually quite like LA, apart from Beverly Hills. Don't get that place at all, but everywhere else I really like. It's lovely. I can see why people live there. I didn't get that when I was younger, and I think as well with LA in particular, there's a lot of LA bashing. There's a lot of, like, you know, you hear everyone else saying, "Oh God, I hate LA," and "Oh," and it's so fake.
People really do love to hate it.
They love to hate it. Did you read that Hugh Laurie article that he wrote? And it was an airline magazine ages ago, and obviously he's been over here doing House and whatever else. I think he lives here now. I don't know the man, but it seems like he does. But he read it in a magazine. But yeah, and he made some really interesting points. Like, it's sunny, the food's good, it's good for work. It's kind of a halfway point. If you're living in one place or another. So it's great. LA isn't the rest of America. I am completely and utterly in love with New York, and always have been, and probably always will be, and would love to live there one day, and that's kind of hopefully something that will be in the near future for me. It's always been inevitable that I'll spend a little bit of time there, so.
Good. Okay, do we have questions? Okay, so we'll do 1, 2, and 3, please.
As a fellow filmmaker, I work in the art department, and I'm just wondering, do you guys ever ask a production designer to bring certain elements to the set, or do you you bring personal items to set or to incorporate that for your characters so you could see that every day?
I never bring personal items, but I definitely talk to everyone who's kind of creating what you see visually, and certainly when you're working on a set, can determine how you exist in that space. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the surroundings that you have around you are obviously really important to just really how the scene plays out and how you, as Toni says, exist in that space and become the character in that space. Apart from photographs and like childhood photographs, I've never really incorporated any of my personal life into that, because that just seems weird to me to do that since I'm playing somebody who's not me. But people from props and things like that I remember for a film I did a couple of years ago, the New York one actually, even though she's very kind of like mouthy and stuff, she's quite introverted as well, and she's got a lot of shit going on in her head, and she has this little diary that she scribbles in all the time, and I never really practice anything in that way when it comes to work, but Kevin McDonald, the director, asked me to just write some stuff down. It would never be seen, but just for me, and it actually really helped. So I would do things like that in the future. Also with Brooklyn, I learned a little bit of bookkeeping, which was really great. It was really nice to even just have a certain type of writing that suits that time, and little things like that really make a difference. I think they're very specific to that time, so it's always lovely if you can seep that into your work if you can.
And I think it creates such a great sense of unity when crew members like yourself are like just as dedicated to creating this world. It's really, really exciting as an actor, I have to say.
How long have you been working in the art department for?
Since 2007.
And did you for that in film, or did you just start with that? It's great.
Thanks. And I think, a microphone. We'll just wait for the microphone.
Thank you. Toni, this is directed to you. You're such a stunning and complex and talented actress, and I'm such a fan of your choices over your career, and my friend Lauren and I both came here to hear you speak. I'd love to know your thoughts over the course of your career, and obviously Saoirse's kind of comments about her character choices, over the evolution and progress of women in cinema, and where you think we are now on that spectrum.
I think there's a huge and unhealthy imbalance in terms of the stories that are told. I have to say personally, I have nothing to complain about, but I know the problem is larger than my own experience. And I think it's a problem that seeps into our society at large. I don't quite know how to fix it except to try to tell stories that represent real women, and to try to get into producing and start films from scratch that represent women in a real way. I want my daughter to grow up seeing real women on screen. Possibly it's got to do with people who are in the positions of power and financing, who make the decisions about the types of films that are made. Also, there are people who are passionate about making films, and there are people who are passionate about making money, and those people kind of stick to a very boring regime of formulaic crap.
Sorry, I know it's not my question, but just to say as well, I think that women really need to support each other within the industry. I think it's really important that we're not being told by men or executives or studio heads or anything like that, anyone, also women, that we need to be in competition with each other, that we need to be bitchy about each other behind the other one's back. I did an audition for something recently, and there were other girls going up for the same role, and we all went out afterwards and hung out, and it was great because we were able to just go, you know what, fuck all that, let's just go and we're all in the same boat, we're all actors, we all love what we do. To be able to support each other, to put everything else, I think in TV they're really starting to do that. I went to the panel yesterday with amazing Lena and Kristen and Mindy and Genji, and it was really inspiring, and it really gave me a little bit more motivation to kind of go, yeah, I think we can do it. I think it's starting to get there. And even with things like Stockholm, you know, that was written and directed by a woman, and it was very much a female focus. We just need to keep going at it and really support each other, I think.
I think we'll go here. Oh, wait. Where are we? Sorry. Yes, there, then there, then there. Okay. Hopefully we'll get to all of them.
Hi, Toni and Saoirse.
Hi.
How are you doing? My question for you is, you know, both of you have worked in various forms in, you know, independent cinema, Hollywood, larger films, smaller films, and television. And I'm curious as to, you know, the type of direction that personally responds best with you, you know, that you take, you know, as you're working and it helps you the best.
I think it depends on the piece you're working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care what size the screen is. I really just want to work with good material. I guess, first of all, I'm really excited and inspired by someone who feels just as dedicated to what you're doing. So it's almost like they're playing the part with you. However, they need to know when to back the fuck off. I mean, I think a good director probably wouldn't need to ask that. It's about intuition. You just know, and that when it works, you know, on a good day when the stars align, it's just it's kind of magic, you know. It's not something you can really create. I think you either have it or you don't.
I have to say, I've been very lucky with all the amazing crews that I've worked with over the years, but I've never really learned as much from anyone as I have from the directors that I've worked with, because I really look to them for just the direction that we're supposed to be going in and the feel of the film. And as Toni said, she's right, you know, with every film, with something like, you know, Wes Anderson, his style is very specific, or his direction is very specific to his style and the types of films that he makes. So everything is kind of more focused on physicality and the tone of how you speak and how kind of clipped it is and how quick the pace is and things like that. So it's kind of technical in that way, and somehow the genius of him is that he's able to bring out that emotion by you just quickening up what you're saying, and then it changes the air of the whole scene. That's why someone like him is so wonderful. I mean, the directors that I've really loved working with are the ones who can really read an actor and know what they need. Actors that really need to be kind of and need a lot of support and need feedback on everything that they do, and I get that because we can be very insecure. You know, you're putting everything that's inside you on show if you're doing your job properly, so you kind of need a little bit of encouragement here and there. But the directors that are able to read that from you and then give you what you need, but then take a step back and allow you to do your job as well is great. So if you can get that balance, I mean, somebody who I haven't worked with but who is absolutely like this is Jim Sheridan, who's a great Irish director. And Jim,
Jack Rain is working with him right now, which is why I'm sitting here and he isn't.
Right now, yeah, lucky duck. But he's brilliant because Jim is like his own character, and he's basically an actor himself. So he'll come in and he talks like that, and he'll give you what you need, and then he just steps back, and you can tell he really enjoys watching actors do what they do. So you learn a lot from so many different styles, I think, as you go on.
Thanks. Was the question here? Oh, back there? Okay.
We are streaming this, as you know, and we have a question from YouTube. For both of you, they'd like to know what's next. What can we expect to see coming up?
The big question, what comes next? Do you have anything next?
I'm sleeping a lot.
Are you working?
I've had a very full few years. To be honest, what I'm about to do is more of a personal adventure. I'm doing an episode of this TV show called Who Do You Think You Are? And I'm scared shitless.
What do you think they're going to find?
Who knows? They don't tell you anything. Everything's revealed as you're shooting. So it's exciting and a little nerve-wracking.
I know what I'm doing next. It's a while away. I can't talk about it yet, but it's terrifying. I'm not gonna tell you. It's terrifying and it's really exciting. But that's kind of at the end of the year. I don't know what I'm. There's a few things floating about, and I've met some really interesting people in LA actually. So hopefully something will come of that. But just like I said before, it's very unpredictable. You don't know what's gonna happen next, when you're gonna work next.
I do have a couple of things, actually. I think the tea's just kicked in. Should I answer now?
Your director's going to be so pissed off that you just forgot their project.
No, I'm doing this. Tim Winton is one of my favourite Australian novelists. I think he generally captures the kind of Australia that I grew up in. And he wrote a book called Dirt Music, which I was such a fan of for years and years, and somebody else had the rights for years and years. And finally, Finola Dwyer got the rights, and Jack Thorne is adapting it. And so we'll be shooting that maybe later this year, actually.
Did Finola just give you the eye from the audience?
No, but I remembered she was here, and I was like, oh, shit.
I think here we had a question, and then there. And then.
Thank you guys both for being with us.
Pleasure.
I have a question about the Hannah character and the character that you played in Stockholm, which I enjoyed both very much. And when I was watching Stockholm, I was thinking of the same thing that you were mentioning that you were afraid of, about the similarities.
Yeah.
But the two characters were either in themselves or the way that you played them very, very different. And I couldn't put my finger on why. So I was trying to recall after I watched Stockholm, like, what is it that's so different? Because they're both very capable. They're both very smart. They're both extremely more educated in many ways in the world that they're going into. And I know you mentioned that in Stockholm you were very static in the way that she remained as she was, that Layla remained as she was. Could you expound a little more on how you accomplished such a stark difference between the two characters that were so peculiarly similar?
Oh, thanks, I think. No, thank you. No. Thanks. Yeah, no, it was something I was worried about, as I said, and I never want to, do the same thing too much. Certainly not in a row. I think the situation they're in, at least, is different. So with Hannah, it was very, very physical. She was very much thrown into a power-hungry world, and I do feel like Hannah does change. I feel like she was constantly on an exploration. She was constantly kind of fascinated by everything around her and was very kind of pure in that way. And I think that's what was so kind of beautiful about her character, is that when she hears music for the first time, she can't quite put her finger on it, like you said, but she knows what it is and she's read about it before, and she's having all these incredible, basically kind of childlike experiences. It's like she's kind of being reborn almost, and seeing the world for the first time. With Leia, she's had, as weird as the situation was, she does have human interaction. I think she's more human than Hannah is, I guess. She's capable of verbally sticking up for herself, So I don't know how different the two of them are, really. Hopefully the situation that they're in and the world that they're in is very, very different. So that'll hopefully be a stark enough difference between the two.
And we'll do the last question right here.
I'm Peter from Latvia, and my question is a little bit more philosophical. What do you believe the mission of an actor is?
Yikes. The mission of an actor. It'll probably sound selfish, but I do it for myself. I do it because I love doing it. I'm an only child, and talking to myself and talking in different accents and pretending I was different people, escapism for me, and it was that was my outlet, was to pretend I was somebody else. So it was kind of always a big part of who I was and how I communicated in a way. And then I found a job to go with that. So I was lucky. I was very, very lucky. I've never really thought that. I mean, I guess with filmmaking, the mission is to tell people's story, to get people into a room. And Jason Isaacs and I were talking about it yesterday, how it becomes a sort of like spiritual thing when a film really works and the whole audience really feels the truth of it. It's an incredible feeling to have. It feels like you're all there together and you're all kind of one. So when that kind of stuff happens, that's wonderful. But really, I just do it because I love it myself. It's a personal mission for me.
Yeah, I do it because I have to do it. I just need to do it. I don't really have a choice. It's strange, but that's how it is. And I think it's simply my job to reflect human nature as honestly as possible.
Lovely. Well, listen, that's all the time we have. Thank you all. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saoirse. Lovely to do this with you.